If someone had told me 12 months ago that the coldest, most intimidating enigma in the entire business world would become my husband, I would have laughed directly in their face. Not a polite laugh. Not a nervous giggle. A full, disrespectful, you've lost your mind kind of laugh. Yet here I am, married to Sebastian Blackwood. And if I'm being completely honest with myself, which I try to be most days, I might just have the best husband in the entire goddamn world. Welcome. For those of you just joining, this is the continuation of my story with Sebastian, the Alpha CEO who accidentally fell asleep on his Enigma rival's shoulder during a red-eye business flight. Yes, that really happened. Yes, we eventually got married. No, I still don't fully understand how. My name is Alexander Vance, 34 years old. CEO of Vance Industries, a tech conglomerate I built from literally nothing but a broken laptop and an idea that everyone told me was stupid. I'm an alpha, always have been, always will be. Strong pheromones, competitive nature, the whole stereotypical package. Before Sebastian, I prided myself on never needing anyone. Then he happened. Sebastian Blackwood, 39. Enigma. CEO of Blackwood Holdings, the investment firm that basically owns half the city. In the corporate world, he's known as the Ghost, not because he's invisible, but because no one can predict what he'll do next. Sharp, ruthless, impossible to read. I've seen grown men cry during negotiations with him. I've watched boardroom veterans retire early rather than face him across a table. But the Sebastian I know, he's something entirely different. Let me back up a little. Not too far, just enough for context. Sebastian and I were rivals for 3 years before that infamous flight. 3 years of competing for the same acquisitions, the same investors, the same media coverage. Our companies were direct competitors in the tech investment space, and neither of us liked to lose. I'd heard the rumors about him, that he had no heart, no emotions, that he was practically a machine designed to generate profit. I believed every single one. Then we ended up seated next to each other on a 12-hour flight from New York to Tokyo. I'd been running on 48 hours of no sleep, closing a deal that had taken 6 months to negotiate. Sebastian had been doing whatever Sebastian does, wearing that perfectly tailored black suit, looking like he was about to attend a funeral or destroy a small country. We exchanged exactly 2 words before takeoff. Mr. Vance. Blackwood. That was it. Somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, my body gave up. I remember my head feeling heavy. I remember thinking absolutely not, to not fall asleep next to him. And then I remember waking up 4 hours later with my cheek pressed against his shoulder, his suit jacket draped over me, and Sebastian Blackwood, the cold, emotionless enigma, sitting perfectly still so he wouldn't disturb me. I lifted my head slowly, mortified. He didn't even look at me. Just kept reading his book and said, "You needed the rest." That was the first crack in the wall. Anyway, that was almost a year ago. We've been married for 6 months now, and I still catch myself staring at him like he's going to disappear. For our honeymoon, Sebastian booked a private island. Not a resort on an island. The entire island. When I asked him how much that cost, he just raised one eyebrow and said, "You don't want to know." He was right. I didn't. The island was unreal. White sand beaches, water so blue it looked photoshopped, a villa that had its own infinity pool, and a staff that appeared whenever you needed something and vanished when you didn't. When we arrived, I walked straight to the balcony of our master suite and just stood there, gripping the railing, trying to process that this was my life now. Behind me, I heard Sebastian's voice low calm, like dark chocolate poured over gravel. "Do you like it?" I turn around. He was leaning against the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching me with that unreadable expression he does so well. But I'd learned to see past it. The slight softness around his eyes. The way his lips weren't quite as tight as they were in boardrooms. "Sebastian," I said, laughing a little, "this place looks like it belongs to royalty." He shrugged. "Barely. You're my husband. You deserve the best." I swear my heart stopped. Actually stopped. That man can say the most dangerous things with the calmest face, and he has no idea what it does to me. Later that evening, I found out something that shocked me even more. Sebastian had taken 15 full business days off work. 15 days. The man who practically lives inside boardrooms and meetings. The man whose assistant once told me, off the record, that Sebastian hadn't taken a vacation in 11 years. He had cleared his entire schedule just to spend time with me. When I heard that, I stared at him like he'd grown a second head. 15 days. I asked, disbelief dripping from every syllable. He nodded casually, pouring wine into 2 glasses. Yes, Sebastian, the business world might collapse without you. He handed me a glass and smirked. Actually smirked. They'll survive without me. I couldn't help laughing. For someone known as the coldest enigma in the industry, Sebastian could be surprisingly stubborn about the sweetest things. But I appreciated it more than I could ever say. That night, we walked along the beach together. The moon was almost full, reflecting beautifully across the waves, and the sound of the ocean created the kind of peace I rarely experienced in my busy life. Sebastian walked beside me silently, his long coat, he wears coats year-round. I've given up questioning it, swaying slightly with the wind. After a while, he spoke. Your mother called earlier. I looked at him curiously. What did she say? His expression softened, just a fraction, but I caught it. She asked if you were eating well. I laughed. That definitely sounds like her. My mother had been surprisingly supportive when Sebastian and I got married. At first, she'd been terrified, mostly because Sebastian's reputation in the business world is genuinely horrifying if you only know him from headlines. But after meeting him, she completely changed her mind. The first time Sebastian visited my mother's house, he brought so many gifts that she kept asking if he was trying to open a department store in her living room. Flowers for the garden. A new coffee maker, because hers was too old. A cashmere blanket because the house gets drafty in winter. By the end of the visit, she was smiling so much I started getting suspicious. A few days later, she called me and said something that still makes me laugh. Alexander, that man of yours? You better treat him well. If you mess this up, I'm keeping him and getting rid of you. Back on the beach, Sebastian glanced at me. What are you smiling about? I shook my head, still chuckling. Just remembering something my mom said. She told me I should treat you well. He raised an eyebrow. Good advice. I nudged his arm. You're enjoying this too much. We kept walking until we reached a quiet part of the island, where there was nothing but sand and ocean and sky. The waves rolled gently against the shore, and the cool night air felt refreshing against my skin. Suddenly, Sebastian stopped walking. I looked up at him. What is it? For a moment, he didn't say anything. His eyes just studied my face, really looked at me, the way he does when he's trying to read something I haven't said yet. Then he spoke, and what he said made my chest tighten. Are you happy? The question surprised me. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because Sebastian rarely asked things he didn't already know. He was the kind of person who observed, calculated, and concluded without needing input. So for him to really ask, meant something. I stared at him for a few seconds before answering. Honestly? Yes, I am. Then I smiled. Sebastian seemed to relax slightly after hearing that. His hand reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair away from my face, wind blown from the beach walk, and that small gesture sent warmth rushing through my entire body. You deserve happiness, he said quietly. I looked up at him, shaking my head with a soft laugh. You know, the world thinks you're a terrifying enigma. That's because I am, he replied, without missing a beat. Really? I teased. Because the Sebastian I know books an entire private island, takes 15 days off work, and walks on the beach with his husband like he's in a romance movie. Sebastian's lips curved. Just barely, but I counted it as a smile. If you want, I can go back to being terrifying. I quickly grabbed his arm. No, thank you. I prefer this version. He chuckled quietly, a low rumbling sound that I felt more than heard. We stood there together, watching the waves under the moonlight, and for the first time in a very long time, life felt calm, peaceful, safe. Of course, peace doesn't last forever. We returned home after the honeymoon, and reality hit like a freight train. Congratulations flooded in from magazines, business journals, social media. Apparently, the wedding of two rival CEOs was newsworthy enough to crash 3 entertainment websites. I ignored most of it. Sebastian ignored all of it. Weeks passed. Work resumed. And at first, I thought the strange feeling in my body was just exhaustion. Returning to work after 15 peaceful days on a private island felt like being thrown back into a storm. My company had meetings lined up one after another. Investors wanted presentations. My assistants were practically chasing me around the office with schedules and coffee and questions I didn't have the energy to answer. Normally, I handled pressure like this without any problem. I'd built Vance Industries from nothing. I'd survived 3 hostile takeover attempts, a boardroom coup, and that time our office building lost power for a week during a heat wave. Pressure was my native language. But something fell off. The first strange thing I noticed was my pheromones. Alphas are usually able to control their scent easily, especially in professional environments, where composure matters most. Losing control of your pheromones in a boardroom is the fastest way to lose respect. I've been doing this for over a decade. I perfected the art of keeping my scent neutral, professional, invisible. Yet for some reason, mine kept leaking. The first incident happened during a meeting with a group of foreign investors. We were discussing a potential merger, something I'd been working toward for months, and everything was going fine. I was confident, articulate, in control. Then, halfway through my presentation, the room got quiet. Not the good kind of quiet. The awkward kind. One of the investors coughed. Another adjusted his collar. A third, a beta in his 50s, suddenly stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped over. "I think we need some air, Mr. Vance," he said, not meeting my eyes. I blinked in confusion. The room was perfectly ventilated. The windows were open. But then my assistant leaned toward me nervously and whispered something that made my face heat up instantly. "Sir, your pheromones." My pheromones? My eyes widened. Only then did I realize what was happening. The scent of my pheromones had filled the entire conference room, a rich, warm alpha scent that was supposed to be under my control. And judging by the way the investors were awkwardly trying to escape the room, it was very strong. The meeting ended almost immediately after that. I spent the next hour sitting in my office, staring blankly at my desk, trying to figure out what the hell was wrong with me. This had never happened before. Not once. Not even during my most stressed, exhausted, sleep-deprived moments. Did I suddenly develop some kind of pheromone disorder? I muttered to myself. As if things weren't already strange enough, that was when the nausea started. At first, it was mild. Just a slight discomfort in my stomach, the kind you ignore because you have work to do. But the moment my assistant walked in with my usual coffee order, black, 2 sugars, the same thing I've been drinking for 15 years, the smell alone nearly made me gag. I turned my chair away, quickly, and covered my mouth. "Sir," my assistant asked, alarmed. "I'm fine," I said weakly. I was absolutely not fine. By the time noon arrived, I'd already rushed to the restroom 3 times. My assistant started giving me worried looks. My calendar was a disaster. And I was starting to wonder if I had food poisoning or the flu or something worse. At that point, I finally decided there was only one person I could call. Sebastian. I picked up my phone and dialed his number. He answered almost immediately, first ring like he'd been waiting. Alexander. Just my name. But his voice, deep, calm, steady, was enough to calm me slightly. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear it until I did. "Sebastian," I said, and my voice came out shakier than I intended. "Something's wrong." His tone changed instantly. Sharp. Alert. "What happened?" I sighed, leaning back in my chair and rubbing my forehead. "I think my pheromones are malfunctioning." There was a short pause. "They keep leaking during meetings," I said miserably. "I cleared an entire room today. They just ran out. Like I had no control at all. And now I'm suddenly nauseous every few minutes." I've been to the bathroom 3 times since breakfast. Another pause. Then Sebastian spoke again, his voice quieter, but somehow more intense. Stay where you are. I'm coming. Sebastian, you're probably in a meeting. The call ended. I stared at my phone. He hung up on me. Typical Sebastian. Less than 40 minutes later, my office door opened and the tall, intimidating figure of my Enigma husband walked inside like a storm. My assistants immediately straightened up at their desks. One of them actually squeaked. "Good afternoon, Mr. Blackwood," someone said. Sebastian barely acknowledged them. His attention was entirely focused on me. When he reached my desk, his sharp eyes scanned my face. My pale skin, the dark circles I hadn't noticed until this moment, the way I was slumped in my chair like I'd run a marathon. "You look terrible," he said. "Thank you. You really know how to make a husband feel special." Without another word, Sebastian gently grabbed my wrist and pulled me to my feet. "Come with me. We're going to the hospital." "There's really no need." "Alexander." There was absolutely no arguing with that tone. An hour later, we were sitting inside a private consultation room at the city's best hospital. Sebastian had pulled strings, or maybe just used his name, to get a scene immediately. The room was quiet, sterile, smelled like antiseptic and anxiety. I nervously rubbed my hands together while Sebastian sat beside me with his usual calm expression, one hand resting on my knee like it was the most natural thing in the world. The doctor, a kind beta woman in her 50s named Dr. Ellis, reviewed my test results on her tablet. Her face was carefully neutral, which I assumed was either very good or very bad. Then she smiled. "Congratulations, Mr. Vance." I blinked at her. "Congratulations." Dr. Ellis looked up from the report, her smile widening. "You're pregnant." For a moment, my brain completely stopped working. I slowly turned to look at Sebastian. His usually unreadable face had completely changed. His eyes were wide, something I had almost never seen before. His lips were parted. His hand on my knee had gone still. "Pregnant?" I whispered. The doctor nodded. "Yes. It's still early, about 8 weeks, but everything looks perfectly healthy. Your pheromone fluctuations and nausea are completely normal for an alpha pregnancy. You want to schedule regular checkups, adjust your diet, and reduce stress where possible." I felt my eyes burning. A strange mix of shock, happiness, and disbelief rushed through my chest all at once. An alpha pregnancy was rare. Not impossible, but rare. Male alphas weren't designed to carry children the way omegas were. But with an Enigma partner, the biology changed. I'd known that theoretically. I just never thought it would happen to me. "I didn't expect this so soon," I admitted softly. Before I could say anything else, Sebastian pulled me into his arms. The hug was tight and warm and safe. I could feel his heart beating steadily against my chest. Fast, actually. Sebastian's heart almost never beat fast. He was the calmest person I'd ever met. But right now, his heart was racing. "I'm so happy," he said quietly. His voice cracked. Sebastian Blackwood's voice cracked. My eyes stung even more. "Me too, Papa," I admitted, laughing weakly through the tears forming in my eyes. The nickname had started as a joke, something I called him when he was being particularly protective, but it had stuck. And right now, it felt right. We're actually going to become parents. Sebastian gently pulled back just enough to look at me. Then he placed his hand carefully over my stomach, over the tiny life growing inside me that I hadn't even known about an hour ago, and said, "I want to take very good care of you. Both of you." True to his word, Sebastian completely ignored his own meetings that day. He personally drove me home himself, refusing to let the driver handle it. Once we arrived at the house, our house, a modern glass and stone thing that Sebastian had bought specifically because it had a garden large enough for future children, he got at me inside like I was made of glass. "Sebastian, I'm not that fragile," I protested. "You're pregnant. That doesn't mean I can't walk. You're resting." There was absolutely no winning against him. A few minutes later, I was sitting comfortably on the couch with a blanket over my legs and a glass of water in my hand, while Sebastian walked into the kitchen. I heard him opening cabinets, pulling out ingredients, muttering something about nutrition. I raised an eyebrow. "You're cooking?" "Yes, honey," he called back. I saw him glance at me from the kitchen doorway, and then he did a little happy dance. Just a small one. A shoulder shimmy and a fist pump that was so out of character, I almost choked on my water. He was so ridiculous. I loved him so much. I leaned back on the couch and laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. The sound echoed through the house, warm and genuine, and I heard Sebastian chuckle in response from the kitchen. A while later, he returned with a simple but warm meal: grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, rice that was perfectly cooked. It smelled surprisingly good, and more importantly, it didn't make me want to run to the bathroom. He placed the tray in front of me and sat beside me on the couch, close enough that our shoulders touched. As I slowly ate, Sebastian sat quietly, occasionally glancing toward me like he was making sure I didn't suddenly disappear. His hand rested on my knee again, warm and solid. I looked at him and smiled. "You know what?" "What?" "You're going to be a great father." Sebastian didn't respond immediately, but the soft expression that appeared on his face, the slight crinkle around his eyes, the almost smile on his lips, told me everything I needed to know. And at that moment, I realized something important. Our lives were about to change in ways we never expected. Pregnancy, as it turned out, was not nearly as calm and peaceful as I had imagined. The first few weeks alone completely turned my life upside down. My mornings started with nausea so strong that even the smell of toast could send me running to the bathroom. My food aversions changed daily. Coffee was fine one day, and repulsive the next. Chicken made me gag, and for some reason, I craved pickles with peanut butter at 3 in the morning. Sebastian, to his credit, went to the grocery store without complaint. And my pheromones, which had always been perfectly controlled throughout my career, now behaved like they had a mind of their own. Sometimes they spilled into meeting rooms so intensely that my poor assistants had to start scheduling longer breaks between appointments just to air out the office. I started warning people before meetings, "If my scent gets strong, just ignore it. Or leave. I won't be offended." It was embarrassing. But Sebastian handled everything like it was the most natural thing in the world. Every morning, he woke up before me, which was impressive because I was usually an early riser. He prepared breakfast himself, made sure I actually ate something before leaving the house, and packed snacks for my office. On days when my nausea was particularly cruel, he would quietly cancel my morning meetings without even asking. "Sebastian, I can't just cancel." "You can." "I already did." "You're not my assistant." "No, I'm your husband." "Which means I have more authority than your assistant." I couldn't argue with that logic. One afternoon, while I was sitting in my office trying to review a contract but failing miserably because my attention kept drifting back to the strange warmth growing in my stomach, Sebastian suddenly walked in. He didn't knock. Sebastian rarely knocked. He simply entered like a man who owned the world, which, to be fair, he basically did. "You're still working," he said. Not a question. An observation. I looked up from my desk. "I run a company, Sebastian. I can't exactly disappear for 9 months." He studied me for a moment, walking closer. There was something thoughtful in his expression, the same look he got before making a major business decision. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Let's merge both companies." I stared at him like he had just suggested we move to the moon. "Sebastian, our companies are competitors. They don't have to be." He pulled a chair closer to my desk and sat down, folding his hands together and looking at me with that calculating gaze that made investors sweat during negotiations. "If we merge the companies, I can manage most of the operations while you focus on your health. You'd still have input. I'm not trying to take anything from you. But the day-to-day stress, the meetings, the negotiations, the investors, I can handle that. You can focus on growing our child." I leaned back slowly in my chair. For a moment, I didn't say anything. The offer itself was enormous. A merger between Vance Industries and Blackwood Holdings would instantly create one of the most powerful corporate groups in the world. It was the kind of decision that could reshape the entire business landscape and make both of us even richer than we already were. But that wasn't what shocked me the most. What shocked me was why Sebastian was offering it. "You're doing this because I'm pregnant," I said quietly. "I'm doing this because you're my husband," he corrected calmly. The room suddenly felt very quiet. I looked down at my hands for a moment, thinking carefully. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. Life would become so much easier if Sebastian carried most of the burden while I focused on the baby and my health. I could still be involved, still have input, still feel like Vance Industries was mine. But another part of me, the part that had built my company from nothing, that had sacrificed sleep and relationships and sanity to make it succeed, wasn't ready to give it up so easily. "I need time to think about it," I finally said. Sebastian nodded once. "Take your time." And just like that, the conversation ended. For the next few days, I thought about his offer constantly. I weighed the pros and cons in my head, wrote lists, talked to my mother who said, "Oh honey, just let the man take care of you for once," and stared at the ceiling at 3 in the morning while our baby, kept me awake with restless kicking. A merger would make everything less stressful. Sebastian was right about that. I could focus on my health, on the pregnancy, on preparing for the baby. I could step back from the chaos and let someone else handle the fires for a change. But every time I imagined handing over my company, even partially, something inside me hesitated. So a few days later, when Sebastian brought the topic up again over dinner, I finally gave him my answer. "I can't do it," I said gently. Sebastian paused mid-bite. "You're sure?" I nodded. "I worked too hard to build Vance Industries from the ground up. I don't want to give that up, even if it's for a good reason. Even if it would make things easier. That company is mine. It's a part of me. And I'm not ready to let that go." For a moment, he was silent. Then he nodded calmly. "I understand." I watched him carefully. "You're not upset?" "Why would I be upset?" he asked, genuinely confused. Sebastian leaned back in his chair and looked at me with a faint smile. One of his rare, genuine ones. "Whether we merge or not, I'm still going to help you. I'm still going to support you. The merger was just an option. If you don't want it, we don't do it." My heart skipped. He reached across the table and gently took my hand. "You're carrying our child," he said quietly. "I'm not letting you handle everything alone. Merger or no merger, I'm here. Whatever you need." I stared at him for a moment before laughing softly. "You really are something else, you know that?" Sebastian raised an eyebrow. "You married me. That was your first mistake. Best mistake I ever made." He squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back. And at that moment, I realized something very comforting. Even if I insisted on standing on my own 2 feet, Sebastian would always be standing right beside me. The months that followed were some of the strangest and happiest months of my life. Pregnancy had a funny way of changing everything. My body was changing. My routines were changing. Even the way people looked at me began to change. At first, the baby bump was barely noticeable, just a slight curve beneath my clothes that only Sebastian seemed to notice. But as the weeks passed, it slowly became more obvious. And every time I caught my reflection in the mirror, I would pause for a moment, placing my hand gently over my stomach as the reality slowly sank in. There's actually a tiny life growing inside me. A child that belonged to both Sebastian and me. Sebastian, meanwhile, had completely transformed. If the business world could see him now, they would never believe it. The terrifying enigma that once made investors tremble with a single glance had somehow become the most attentive and protective husband imaginable. He monitored my meals, my sleep, my stress levels. He started monitoring my work hours and calling my assistant to check on me when I worked too late. He called me at 9 p.m. last night. My assistant told me one morning, looking shell-shocked. "Mr. Blackwood asked if you'd eaten dinner." I didn't even know he had my number. Neither did I admitted. One evening, I was still sitting in my office, reviewing documents, when my door suddenly opened. I didn't even need to look up. "Papa," I said tiredly. I heard him chuckle, that low rumbling sound I loved. How did you know it was me? You're the only person in this building who walks into my office like you own it. I practically do, he replied without missing a beat. I finally looked up and saw him standing there in his dark coat, his sharp gaze scanning the room before landing on me. Then his eyes moved slowly downward, toward my stomach, which was now round and obvious at 6 months pregnant. You're still working, he said. Yeah, just tidying up some important documents. You should be resting. I leaned back in my chair and crossed my arms, or tried to anyway. My bump made it awkward. I run a company, Sebastian. Being pregnant doesn't mean I suddenly forgot how to work. Sebastian walked closer to my desk, completely unfazed by my protest. Then he did something that immediately made me suspicious. He reached over, closed my laptop. You're done for today. Sebastian, our child needs rest, he said, his tone cool, but his eyes warm. And so do you. Before I could finish arguing, he gently placed his hand on my stomach. The words disappeared from my mouth instantly. His expression softened in a way that still surprised me. Every time, no matter how many times I saw it. Our son, he said quietly. My eyes widened. Our son. Sebastian nodded. We got the results this morning. I wanted to tell you in person. I blinked at him, stunned. You already knew. And you didn't tell me. I wanted to see your reaction first. I stared at him for a moment before bursting into laughter. You are unbelievable. But despite my playful complaint, my heart felt incredibly warm. Sebastian and I were going to have a son. Later that night, as we sat together in the living room, I kept resting my hand over my stomach with a quiet smile. Sebastian noticed. You're doing that a lot, he said. Doing what? He gestured toward my stomach. Touching it. Like you're reassuring yourself he's still there. I laughed softly. I can't help it. I looked down again at the round swell beneath my shirt. It still feels unreal. Like any moment, I'm going to wake up and find out this was all a dream. Sebastian moved closer, shifting on a couch until he was right next to me. Then he gently placed his hand over mine. Warm, large, steady. For a moment, we both stayed quiet. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the heating system and the distant sound of rain against the windows. Then I felt something strange. A small movement. Inside my stomach. Like a tiny flutter or a gentle tap. My eyes widened. Sebastian. I think the baby just moved. Sebastian froze. His hand went still on my stomach. Are you serious? Yeah. I laughed, breathless. I felt it. Right there. His hand remained careful against my stomach as we both waited. A few seconds passed. Then it happened again, a small, gentle movement like our son was saying hello. Sebastian's usually calm expression completely broke. For the first time since I had known him, he looked stunned. His eyes were wide. His lips were slightly parted. His hand on my stomach was trembling. Just a little, barely noticeable, but I felt it. Did you feel that? I asked softly. He nodded slowly. He's strong. I laughed quietly. Well, his father is an enigma. Sebastian raised an eyebrow. And his other father is an alpha CEO who refuses to rest. I nudged his arm with a grin. But despite our teasing, the warmth in the room felt deeper than words. Sebastian kept his hand on my stomach for a long time, his thumb tracing small circles over the fabric of my shirt, and I leaned my head against his shoulder and closed my eyes. This was happiness. Real, quiet, unexpected happiness. By the 8th month, my stomach had grown almost twice its previous size. I was tired, restless. My back ached constantly, and my feet had swollen to the point where my shoes didn't fit. Sebastian bought me 3 pairs of slippers in different sizes, just in case. I couldn't sleep through the night anymore, partly because of the discomfort, partly because our son had apparently decided that 3 a.m. was the perfect time for gymnastics. Eventually, I decided to take a short break from work. My mother had been calling constantly, insisting that I come stay with her for a few days. You need proper home cooking, she said, and someone to boss you around. Sebastian is too nice to you. Sebastian is not too nice to me, I protested. He let you work until 7 last night. That's too nice. I couldn't argue with that. So one morning, I packed a small bag while Sebastian stood near the doorway, watching me. His expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. You're only staying a few days, he asked. Yes, a long weekend. I'll be back before you know it. Maybe I should come with you. I gave him a hard stare, the kind that meant not again. Sebastian frowned slightly, but in the end, he reluctantly agreed. Call me if you need anything. And if you feel uncomfortable or tired, or if your mother stresses you out. Sebastian, you're worrying too much. He looked at me for a moment. Then he walked over and gently pulled me into a hug. Careful, always careful around my bump, and kissed my forehead. Take care of yourself, he said quietly. And take care of our son. I nodded, smiled softly, and left. Staying with my mother for a few days turned out to be exactly what I needed. Her house had always been peaceful, the kind of place where the noise of the outside world somehow faded the moment you stepped inside. The same small garden sat in front of the house, full of flowers she'd been tending for 30 years. The same warm scent of home-cooked meals filled the air. Every time I visited, I was reminded of how much my parents had struggled to raise me there, in that small house with a leaky roof and a broken fence. Now the roof was fixed, the fence was new, and I was about to become a parent myself. My mother was beyond excited. From the moment I arrived, she practically refused to let me do anything on my own. If I tried to stand for too long, she would push me gently back into a chair. If I reached for something on a high shelf, she would appear from nowhere to grab it first. Mom, I'm pregnant. Not a weakling. She gave me a look. You're carrying my grandchild. That makes you fragile. I laughed. You sound just like Sebastian. At the mention of his name, she smiled warmly. That young man calls every single day, you know? I know. And he sends flowers. And food. And he asked me if you were sleeping well. And eating well. And, Mom, I know. Of course I knew. Sebastian called constantly, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day. Sometimes it was to ask if I had eaten. Sometimes it was to ask if I had rested. Sometimes it was simply to hear my voice. And every single time, my mother would find an excuse to walk past me and listen to my side of the conversation, grinning like a teenager. He really loves you, she said one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. I know, I said softly. Good. Because you deserve it. A week later, the results came in. Our child was going to be an S-tier alpha. When the doctor explained it to us over the phone, extremely strong pheromone signature, exceptional genetic markers, one of the strongest we've ever seen, I could practically feel Sebastian's pride through the silence on the other end of the call. A strong alpha, he finally said. I chuckled. He definitely inherited your dramatic genes. Sebastian ignored the comment. I'm sending something to your mother's house tomorrow. What? Sebastian, you don't need to. But he had already hung up. The next morning, 3 delivery trucks arrived at my mother's house. I stood by the window with my mouth slightly open while workers carefully unloaded expensive baby furniture, clothes, toys, blankets, and things I didn't even recognize. A crib that probably cost more than my first car. A rocking chair that looked like it belonged in a palace. A mobile with hand-carved wooden stars. My mother appeared beside me, equally stunned. Is Sebastian opening a baby store? She asked slowly. I rubbed my forehead. That actually sounds like something he would do. Despite the overwhelming and honestly excessive gifts, the weeks passed peacefully. I rested. I ate my mother's cooking. I talked to Sebastian every night before bed. And slowly, the stress and chaos of the past months began to fade. Then, a week later, everything changed. I had just finished breakfast, pancakes, because my mother refused to let me leave the table until I'd eaten enough for 3 people, when a strange tightness suddenly spread across my stomach. I froze. My mother noticed immediately. Alexander, what's wrong? I grabbed the edge of the table. I think the baby is coming. Another wave of pain hit me, stronger this time, sharper. My eyes widened. My mother gasped. Oh my goodness. Things moved quickly after that. Sebastian was called. The hospital was contacted. Within what felt like minutes, I was in the back of my mother's car, clutching my stomach, trying to breathe through the pain while she drove faster than I'd ever seen her drive in my life. Sebastian's voice came through the phone speaker inside the car. I'm already on my way. Stay calm. I'll be there before you. By the time I arrived at the hospital, Sebastian was already waiting at the entrance. His usually composed expression had been replaced with pure concern. His hair was disheveled. Sebastian's hair was never disheveled. He must have run from the parking lot. He rushed forward immediately, grabbing my hand, guiding me inside. I'm here, he said. I'm right here. I gripped his hand tightly. You didn't miss it. I wouldn't dare. He stayed right there beside the hospital bed for hours, holding my hand, his calm voice grounding me every time another wave of pain came. You're doing well, he kept saying. You're doing so well. Just breathe. I've got you. And he did. Eventually, after what felt like the longest day of my life, I woke up to a baby's cry. The sound filled the room like the most beautiful music I had ever heard. Tears filled my eyes immediately. I couldn't stop them. I was exhausted, sore, shaking, but when the doctor placed a small, warm bundle in my arms, nothing else mattered. Congratulations, Mr. Vance, the doctor said warmly. You have a healthy baby boy. I stared down at him. He was perfect. Small and warm, with a tuft of dark hair, Sebastian's hair, and tiny fingers curled into fists. His eyes were closed, but when he opened them for a moment, I saw they were the same shade of gray as his father's. He was crying, his little face scrunched up, but the moment I started talking to him, he quieted. Hey there, little one, I whispered, my voice breaking. I'm your dad. I've been waiting to meet you. Sebastian was called in a few minutes later. He stood beside me, completely silent, as he looked at our son. His eyes were red. Had he been crying? Sebastian Blackwood never cried, but his eyes were definitely red. The doctor spoke again. Your child is extremely healthy. And judging by his pheromone signature, this boy is definitely an S-tier alpha as detected. Sebastian finally spoke. His voice was rough. Of course he is. I laughed weakly. He just arrived, and you're already bragging. Sebastian gently touched the baby's tiny hand. Our son's fingers immediately wrapped around Sebastian's thumb, a reflex, but it looked like he was holding on. For a moment, the powerful Enigma CEO looked completely speechless. Then he looked at me. Thank you, he said quietly. My heart melted. You're thanking me like I did this alone. You carried him, Sebastian replied. You grew him inside you. You brought him into the world. That matters. I looked down at our son again. His tiny fingers were still wrapped around Sebastian's thumb, and his eyes, gray like Sebastian's, were starting to focus on nothing in particular. Welcome to the world, little one, I whispered. You have no idea how much you're loved. If there was one thing Sebastian Blackwood never did halfway, it was celebration. Our son had barely been a week old when Sebastian announced he would be hosting a naming ceremony. And not just any ceremony. A massive one. I was sitting on the couch, feeding the baby, when he casually mentioned it like he was talking about ordering lunch. A naming ceremony? I repeated slowly. How big is it going to be? Sebastian glanced up from the tablet he was reading. Moderate. That should have been my first warning. Because when Sebastian Blackwood said moderate, it usually meant something completely outrageous. And I was right. 3 days later, the venue, a private estate Sebastian owned outside the city, had transformed into something that looked like a royal event. Luxury cars lined the street outside. Elegant white decorations filled the garden. Security guards stood near the gates, carefully checking invitations as powerful guests arrived one after another. Business leaders, investors, corporate giants. People who normally terrified entire industries were now standing in our garden, chatting politely while holding glasses of champagne. All of them had come to celebrate the birth of our son. I adjusted the sleeve of my suit, looser than usual, to accommodate my post-pregnancy body, and glanced toward the small cradle placed near the center of the room. Our baby boy was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that half the business world was currently gathered outside because of him. Sebastian walked toward me at that moment, looking as composed and intimidating as always in his perfectly tailored black suit. "You should be sitting," he said. "I've been sitting all day. I'm greeting guests. You can greet them sitting." I gave him a tired look. "Sebastian, I'm fine." He studied my face carefully, like he was checking for signs of exhaustion. Only after a few seconds did he nod. "Don't overdo it." "I won't." But the truth was, it was already a little overwhelming. Guests kept approaching to congratulate us. Some complimented the baby. Others praised Sebastian. A few whispered about how strong the child's future would be, an S-tier alpha born to an Enigma and an alpha, the best of both bloodlines. Eventually, my mother walked over, carrying the baby carefully in her arms. "He just woke up," she said softly. I immediately leaned closer. Our son, we hadn't announced the name yet, blinked slowly, his tiny eyes opening as if he was trying to understand why so many people were suddenly surrounding him. Sebastian stepped closer too. For a moment, the intimidating Enigma simply stared at the tiny baby in my mother's arms. The expression on his face softened in a way that only appeared when he looked at our son. "He looks like you," my mother said with a smile. Before Sebastian could respond, one of the event coordinators approached us. "Mr. Blackwood, the guests are asking if the naming announcement will begin soon." Sebastian nodded. In a moment, as the coordinator left, I gently touched the baby's cheek. "He's going to be so spoiled," I said. Sebastian looked at our son again. "That's unavoidable." I shook my head, smiling. Then someone called my name from across the hall. "Alexander." "Over here." A group of investors were waving at me. "He sighed softly." "Duty calls." Sebastian glanced toward them before looking back at me. "Don't take long. I want you there for the announcement. I'll be right back." I leaned over and kissed our son's forehead, soft, warm, perfect, before turning to greet the guests. The conversation lasted longer than I expected. Business people always had a way of turning simple greetings into 20-minute discussions about market trends and future partnerships. I smiled, nodded, made promises I might not keep, and slowly worked my way back toward the main hall. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The atmosphere had changed. Guests were whispering. Some were looking around in confusion. My mother was standing near the cradle, empty-handed. My stomach dropped. I walked toward her quickly. "Mom." She turned toward me. Her face was pale. "Why, where's my baby?" Her lips trembled. I only stepped away for a moment, just to get some water. He was sleeping, and I thought he would be fine. My heart began pounding violently. "Where is he?" "I put him in the cradle," she said quickly. "He was sleeping. I only wanted to get some water." But when I came back, she looked at the empty cradle and her face crumpled. He was gone. The word echoed loudly inside my head. Gone. My chest tightened instantly. I rushed toward the cradle, pushing past guests who were starting to murmur in confusion. The blankets were still warm, but the baby was gone. Panic spread through the room like wildfire. Guests began whispering louder. Security guards rushed inside. I saw them speaking urgently into their earpieces, fanning out through the venue. My mother was crying. Someone was asking what was happening. Someone else was calling for help. Sebastian appeared beside me almost instantly. His face was hard, controlled, but I saw the fury beneath it. "What happened?" I turned toward him, my voice shaking. "The baby. He's gone. Someone took him." For the first time since I had known Sebastian, I saw something terrifying flash through his eyes. Pure fury. The entire hall erupted into chaos. Security began checking every exit. Staff members ran through the halls, searching. Guests whispered nervously as the celebration collapsed into panic. Then suddenly Sebastian's phone rang. The sound cut through the noise like a blade. He slowly pulled it out of his pocket. "Unknown number," he said, his voice dangerously low. The moment he answered, the room seemed to fall silent. "Hello," Sebastian said coldly. For a few seconds he said nothing. His expression darkened. I could hear a faint voice from the other end of the phone, a voice that sounded strangely familiar. My blood ran cold. Then Sebastian spoke again. James Corner. The same alpha from our past. The same man who had tried to sabotage our companies, spread rumors about us, and been publicly humiliated when his schemes were exposed at a dinner party almost a year ago. We thought he'd disappeared. We thought he'd given up. We were wrong. Sebastian's grip tightened around the phone. "What do you want?" There was a pause. Then Sebastian's voice became dangerously calm, the calm before the storm. "You're insane." My heart stopped. Sebastian slowly lowered the phone. I looked at him desperately. "Sebastian, is that James Corner?" He nodded. His eyes were colder than I had ever seen them. "He has our son, and he's demanding something huge." The room felt like it was spinning. There are moments in life when time slows down. When the world becomes quiet, even though chaos is happening all around you. James Corner's voice on the phone was one of those moments. Sebastian had placed the call on speaker when James called back, so I heard everything. Every single word. "Well," James said lazily from the other end, his tone almost amused. "I suppose congratulations are in order. Beautiful baby, by the way." My hands began to shake. Sebastian's voice was dangerously calm. "You took my son." "Oh, don't sound so dramatic," James replied. "I simply claimed an opportunity." My vision blurred for a second. We had never wronged him. Never humiliated him. Never touched his business. Yet somehow he had been holding on to resentment ever since that dinner night, the night his schemes were exposed, the night he lost investors, the night everyone saw who he really was. Sebastian's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" A small chuckle. 50%. The room fell completely silent. 50% of Blackwood Holdings, James repeated. "Transfer the shares to my name. I'll send the paperwork." My mind quickly calculated the estimate. Half of Sebastian's company. Half of everything he'd built. Even for Sebastian, that was enormous. "You're insane," I whispered. James laughed softly. "You have 2 hours. I'll send the details. Transfer the shares, and Sebastian, do not attempt anything stupid, or your precious little S-tier alpha will disappear from this world before he even learns how to crawl." The call ended. I couldn't breathe. Sebastian stood perfectly still, staring at the phone in his hand like he wanted to crush it into dust. His face was unreadable, but I knew him well enough to see the rage simmering beneath the surface. A tall man in a dark suit walked into the room, flanked by 2 security officers. His presence was calm but sharp, the kind of aura that spoke of experience. Sebastian's head of security, Marcus Cole. "Mr. Blackwood," he said firmly, "we receive your emergency alert. We're tracking the call. He won't be far." Sebastian turned slowly. "Find him." Marcus nodded once. But before anything else could be said, Sebastian's phone rang again. The third call. Sebastian answered immediately. "I can see unusual movement near your estate," James said casually. "Call off your men, or your baby loses oxygen in the next 10 minutes. My blood froze. He was watching us. Sebastian's eyes flickered toward the windows. Marcus was right. James wasn't far. He was close enough to see what we were doing. "I'll send the transfer details now," James continued. "Transfer the shares. No tricks." A notification appeared on Sebastian's phone. A secure link, paperwork ready for signature. Sebastian didn't hesitate. His fingers moved quickly. He opened the document, scrolled to the signature line, and signed. Half of Blackwood Holdings. Transferred to James Corner. I stared at him. Sebastian, you're giving it to him. I'm getting our son back, he replied coldly. The confirmation pinged. Transaction complete. But something inside me snapped. No one steals my child and walks away like that. The room was still in chaos. Guests being escorted out, security coordinating search teams. My mother crying in a corner, but my ears were ringing with one single thought. My son. Sebastian turned toward me. Alexander. But I was already walking. Up the stairs. Into our bedroom. I opened the safe, the one Sebastian had installed after we got married, for emergencies, and pulled out the gun. A Glock 19, clean, loaded, ready. The cold metal felt heavy in my hand. I changed quickly. Dark clothing. Gloves. Boots. James wanted to play Mafia? Then he picked the wrong father. When I walked back downstairs, Marcus Cole looked at me with sharp interest. His eyes moved to the gun in my hand, then to my face. He didn't question it. He just nodded. I'm coming, I said. Sebastian stepped in front of me. Alexander, I will handle this. You need to rest. You just gave birth. I looked up at him. He took our newborn. Right in front of us. In our own home. And you think I'm staying here? His jaw tightened. You're still recovering. That doesn't stop me from protecting my son. He stared at me for a long moment, longer than I expected. Then something shifted in his expression. Acceptance. Respect. Maybe even pride. Stay behind me, he said quietly. Not a chance. Marcus stepped forward. We traced the signal from the second call. Abandoned warehouse near the docks. About 15 minutes from here. Sebastian nodded once. Let's move. The ride to the warehouse felt endless. Every second stretched painfully. Every breath burned. I sat in the back of Marcus's SUV with Sebastian beside me, his hand gripping mine so tightly I could feel his heartbeat through his palm. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. When we arrived, the warehouse stood silent under the night sky, dark, looming, surrounded by shipping containers and the distant sound of water. Marcus motioned for silence as we approached. His team fanned out, covering the exits. Sebastian and I slipped inside through a side entrance, moving through the shadows. The warehouse smelled like rust and salt and something else. Something wrong. And then I heard it. The faint cry of my baby. My heart nearly exploded. Across the dimly lit warehouse, near a van parked against the far wall, James Corner stood holding my son. Our son. My baby. He was holding him like some kind of twisted trophy, one arm wrapped around his tiny body, the other holding a phone, probably tracking Sebastian's men. He turned when he heard movement. Well, he smirked. I expected Sebastian. Not the pretty alpha. You got me instead, I said coldly. James laughed. The pretty alpha finally shows his claws. He shifted slightly, adjusting his grip on the baby, his weight moving to one side. Our son was crying, his little face red, his tiny fists waving in the air. The sound tore through me like a blade. The moment James moved his weight to one side, I raised the gun. Then I shot. The sound echoed violently through the warehouse, loud, final, satisfying. James screamed as the bullet tore through his shoulder. He stumbled backward, dropping to one knee, his arm loosening around the baby. But I was already running. I reached him in seconds, ripped my son from his arms, and stumbled backward, cradling the baby against my chest. He was crying loudly, but he was alive, warm, breathing, perfect. I turned the gun back toward James, who was clutching his bleeding shoulder, staring at me in shock. You thought I was soft, I said, my voice shaking with fury. You thought I would stay home and cry while my husband handled it. You thought I was just some alpha who got lucky. I stepped closer, the gun steady in my hand. How dare you lay your bacteria-infested hands on my son? James stared at me, his face pale, blood seeping through his fingers. You're insane. No, I said. I'm a father. Marcus stepped forward, gun aimed at James's head. You're finished, he said calmly. Within minutes, James was restrained, hands cuffed behind his back, bleeding shoulder wrapped in a makeshift bandage, his face twisted with pain and fury. Security swarmed the warehouse. Police sirens sounded in the distance. And then Sebastian was there. His car must have screeched to a stop outside. I hadn't even heard it. But suddenly he was in front of me, his hands cupping my face, his eyes searching mine. Alexander. I'm fine, I said. He's fine. I looked down at our son, still cradled against my chest, still crying but quieting now. He's safe. Sebastian gently touched the baby's cheek. So gently, like he was afraid he might break him. Then he looked at James, being dragged toward the exit by Marcus's team. Make him transfer everything back, Sebastian ordered coldly. Every share, every document, everything. Under pressure, with undeniable evidence against him and a bullet wound in his shoulder, James had no choice. The funds were reversed. The shares were returned. Every single dollar, every single asset back where it belonged. As the police took James away, shouting threats, cursing our names, he glared at us with pure hatred. You think this is over? James yelled. You think you've won? I'll be back. I'll destroy both of you. Sebastian stepped forward, his voice cutting through James's rant like a blade. It is over. For you. Not for us. James's face twisted. But the police shoved him into the car, and the door slammed, and the sound of his voice faded into the night. I stood there, holding my son tightly against my chest, his tiny body warm and safe in my arms. My hands were still shaking. My heart was still racing. But we were okay. We were all okay. Sebastian turned to me. His face was still hard, but when he looked at our son, something soft broke through. He stepped closer and wrapped his arms around both of us, pulling us into his chest. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have killed him when I had the chance. You got our son back, I said. That's what matters. Sebastian pulled back just enough to look at me. His gray eyes, our son's gray eyes, were burning with something fierce. You were incredible. I laughed weakly. I shot a man. You protected our child. I looked down at our son, who had finally stopped crying. His tiny eyes were open, watching the world with that unfocused newborn gaze. He had no idea what had just happened. No idea how close he had come to danger. All he knew was that he was warm and safe and held by people who loved him. There is no force in this world stronger than a father protecting his child, I said quietly. Sebastian pressed a kiss to my forehead. James Corner just learned that the hard way. A few days after the kidnapping, the world slowly began to calm down again. James Corner, the man who dared to steal our precious newborn right under our noses, was locked behind bars. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Security footage, phone records, eyewitness testimony, and the bullet wound that matched my gun. After a quick but intense legal process, he was sentenced to 14 years in prison for kidnapping, extortion, assault, and endangering a child. When the verdict was announced, I expected Sebastian to be satisfied. Maybe even relieved, in that calm enigma way he always was when a problem was solved. But instead, the first thing he did was turn toward me. I was holding our son in my arms, gently rocking him while he slept. Sebastian stepped closer and placed a hand on my shoulder, his gaze softening as he looked at both of us. We're leaving, he said. I blinked in confusion. Leaving? Where? A vacation, he replied calmly. You, me, and our son. Just like that, the Enigma CEO who used to live inside endless meetings and business schedules cleared everything on his calendar without hesitation. No arguments. No negotiations. Just done. A few days later, we arrived at a beautiful resort in Miami, far away from the noise of the city, far away from news headlines and business calls and the memory of that warehouse. The air smelled fresh and peaceful. The ocean stretched out before us, endless and blue. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like we could breathe again. Sebastian walked beside me along the beach, carrying our son. Our baby, Theodore Sebastian Blackwood, Theo for short, was wrapped carefully in a soft blanket, his tiny face peaceful in sleep. Sebastian held him against his chest like he was the most precious treasure in the world. I couldn't help smiling as I watched him. Sebastian checked on Theo every few minutes, if he was warm enough, comfortable enough, breathing peacefully. At one point, I laughed and nudged him. You know, the great Sebastian Blackwood has now become a full-time baby guard. Sebastian glanced at me with completely serious expression. Of course. Someone has to protect him. I raised an eyebrow. And the 20 security guards you brought with us? They protect the resort, he replied calmly. I burst out laughing. The sound carried across the beach, light and free, and Sebastian's lips twitched, almost a smile. He looked down at Theo again, adjusting the blanket gently, before speaking in that deep, enigma voice that always made my heart feel safe. You both are my responsibility, he said quietly. My family. Hearing that made my chest warm. Later that evening, we sat together on a quiet balcony overlooking the ocean. The sky was glowing with the colors of sunset, orange and pink and gold, spreading across the horizon like a painting. Theo slept peacefully in Sebastian's arms, completely unaware that he had already turned his father into the softest enigma in existence. I leaned my head against Sebastian's shoulder and sighed happily. You know, I murmured, if someone told me a year ago that I'd marry my rival and have a baby with him, I would have thought they were crazy. Sebastian chuckled softly, that low rumbling sound I loved. Well, he said, life clearly knew what it was doing. Theo suddenly made a tiny sleepy sound, a soft coo that was barely audible, and Sebastian instantly looked down with concern, checking if he was okay. I laughed again. You are so overprotective. He didn't deny it. Instead, he gently kissed Theo's tiny forehead and whispered his name. Theodore Sebastian Blackwood. I looked at them both, my husband, my son, the sunset painting everything gold, and felt something deep inside my heart settle peacefully. All the rivalry, all the chaos, all the danger we had faced, the accidental nap on a plane, the unexpected pregnancy, the fear and the fury, and the bullet I fired in a warehouse. It had somehow led us here, to this quiet moment, to this little family. Sebastian wrapped one arm around my shoulders while still holding Theo safely against his chest, pulling us both closer as the sun slowly disappeared behind the ocean. I bless the universe for sending you to me, Sebastian said, looking at me with calm, steady eyes. I smiled back at him, really smiled, the kind of smile that came from somewhere deep and real, and whispered, I love you beyond words, Papa. That same word. The one that always made him smile. And he did smile. That rare, genuine, heart-stopping smile that no one else in the world got to see. He pulled me close and we kissed, right there under the fading sun, with our son sleeping peacefully between us, the sound of the waves below and the warmth of each other beside. Complete. As a family. Then,